Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It started with little things. She laughed at his private jokes, the ones only I should understand. She knew exactly how he took his coffee, sometimes even ordering it before he did. She remembered our anniversary before he did, and when I mentioned it, she smiled like it was an inside joke. I told myself she was just observant, friendly, maybe even a little too involved. But then I saw the way she looked at him. And that changed everything. I first noticed her at my husband's office party. She was standing too close, her body angled toward him in a way that felt too personal. Every time he spoke, her eyes lit up, like she already knew what he was going to say. I brushed it off until she casually mentioned how stressed he'd been about our mortgage. That was personal. That was between us. How did she know? One morning, I surprised my husband at work with coffee, his favorite, a simple black with 2 sugars. But when I arrived, I saw her. She was handing him a coffee, and he took it without hesitation, sipping it like it was routine. I froze. "Oh, hey," she chirped, smiling at me. I figured he needed his usual pick-me-up. I forced a smile, but my mind was racing. How did she know his usual? The first time she said my name, I felt something was off. It was too familiar, too casual, like she knew me more than I knew her. "It's so great to finally meet you, Lisa," she said, emphasizing my name in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just friendliness. It felt loaded, like she had been waiting for this moment. Like she knew something I didn't. I started paying closer attention. One day, we ran into each other at a coffee shop, and I casually mentioned a trip my husband and I were planning. Her face flickered with something. Surprise? Guilt? "Oh, I thought," he said. She cut herself off and smiled too quickly. My heart pounded. What did she think he said? What was she about to reveal? I couldn't shake the feeling that she had stopped herself from saying something important. That night, I asked my husband about her. "Oh, Claire? She's just a coworker," he said with a dismissive shrug. But I caught the hesitation, the slight flicker of something in his eyes. Was it guilt? Or was I imagining things? I started watching them more closely. At the next work event, I stood back and observed. She laughed before he even finished his jokes, nodded before he finished his sentences. It was like she already knew what he was thinking. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something felt off. One evening, I decided to test the waters. I asked her a simple question. "How long have you worked with my husband?" She hesitated. "Oh, a couple of years." A lie. I knew for a fact she had only been there for a year. Why lie about something so small? Unless there was something bigger she was hiding. A coworker of my husband's, a woman named Julia, pulled me aside at an office gathering. "Be careful with Claire," she whispered. My heart pounded. "Why?" I asked. Julia glanced at Claire, who was laughing at something my husband said. She just knows too much." The words sent a chill through me. That night, my husband was in the shower when his phone buzzed. A message from Claire lit up the screen. Did she suspect anything? My breath caught in my throat. Suspect what? My hands shook as I stared at the screen. My husband walked back in, reaching for his phone. I had seconds to decide, confront him now or dig deeper first. I didn't have the courage to confront him that night. Instead, I waited until the morning, when the weight of the message still lingered in my mind. "Who was that message from?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He paused, glancing at his phone. "Just a colleague. Nothing to worry about." His tone was too casual, too practiced. A few days later, I overheard a conversation between my husband and Claire in the kitchen. She said something about a weekend getaway, and I froze. "You're not planning anything, are you?" I asked, stepping into the room. Claire quickly smiled and looked at my husband. "Oh, I was just joking about a work retreat." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The way Claire looked at my husband when she thought no one was watching. It wasn't just admiration. It was longing, something deeper. I had seen that look in my own eyes when I first fell for him. I wanted to confront her, demand answers, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What if I was wrong? A few days later, my husband had a late meeting at work. But when I checked his calendar, there was nothing scheduled. Curiosity got the best of me. I drove by the office and saw his car parked in the lot, along with Claire's. My heart raced as I watched them both walk out together, laughing like old friends. I waited for a moment, then followed them. Chapter 15, The Hotel Revelation. They went to a hotel. I couldn't believe it. I parked across the street and watched them enter, arms linked. I stayed in the car, paralyzed. A million thoughts raced through my mind. But one thing was clear, they weren't just co-workers. Something deeper was going on. My hands shook as I stared at the hotel, wondering what I was going to do next. I sat in my car for hours, unable to move. Every second felt like a lifetime. Eventually, I saw them leave the hotel, still laughing, still too close. My husband kissed her on the cheek before getting in his car, and that was the moment my heart shattered. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Was I crazy to think that this was more than just a friendship? When I finally confronted my husband later that night, he denied everything. She's just a colleague, nothing more, he insisted. But I had seen enough. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The texts, the secret meetings, the way he looked at her sometimes with that distant, dreamy gaze. I checked his phone when he wasn't looking, and what I found made my stomach drop. More messages, more flirtation. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "You're lying to me," I shouted. "You and Claire. There's something going on between you two, isn't there?" He froze, the color draining from his face. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. I threw the phone in front of him, the text messages glaring up at him like a confession. The truth was staring him in the face, but he refused to admit it. His silence spoke louder than words. I saw it then, the guilt. It was in his eyes, in the way his hands trembled. "I didn't want to hurt you," he finally whispered. But it was too late for apologies. I wanted answers, not excuses. "What's been going on?" I demanded. He sighed and slumped against the wall. "I didn't know how to tell you." My husband's confession came in slow, painful fragments. "Claire and we've been close. Closer than we should have been. I didn't mean for it to happen, but—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I stood there, in shock, hearing him admit what I had feared all along. It wasn't just work bonding. It wasn't just friendship. It was something more. He told me everything. How their late-night talks turned into something deeper, how their friendship had blurred the lines. "I never meant for you to find out like this," he said, his voice filled with regret. But his words didn't change the fact that I had been living a lie for months. I had trusted him, and he had shattered that trust. I couldn't think straight. My heart ached with betrayal, but my mind was clear. "What do you want from me now?" I asked, my voice cold. He stared at me, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I don't know. I just want to fix this," he whispered. "But could it be fixed? Could we ever go back to what we had before? Or was everything ruined beyond repair?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything. The signs, the hidden moments, the subtle ways Claire had wormed her way into our lives. I felt stupid for not seeing it earlier. I had been so wrapped up in our life, in our routine, that I failed to notice how he was slipping away from me. And now, I wasn't sure if I could forgive him. The next day, I watched him, his every movement a reminder of the lie he had built. There was no anger in my eyes anymore, just emptiness. He tried to reach out, to apologize, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What could I say? "It's over. I can't trust you anymore." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't find the words. I couldn't let Claire get away with this. She had been so smug, so sure that I didn't know. So I called her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She hesitated before agreeing to meet. When I saw her face to face, I was calm, colder than I'd ever been. "What do you want with my husband?" I asked. Her smile faltered, and I saw the truth in her eyes. Claire's face paled when I confronted her. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "It just did. I never wanted to hurt you." I could barely contain the rage inside me, but I stayed calm. "You've been playing with my life," I said through gritted teeth. "You knew exactly what you were doing." She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I never planned on this," Claire continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought he was just a friend. But somewhere along the way, it changed, and She trailed off, leaving her sentence unfinished. I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. "You've taken something from me that I'll never get back," I told her, the pain in my chest threatening to suffocate me. She nodded, guilt written all over her face. My mind kept circling back to everything. The trust one had lost, the future I had imagined with my husband. I wasn't sure how we could ever move forward, or if it was even possible. But when he begged me to forgive him, a part of me still wanted to believe him. "I love you," he whispered. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but I need you." Was love enough to fix this? The days following the confrontation were a blur. I kept asking myself if I could forgive him, if we could rebuild what had been broken. But I kept picturing Claire, smiling at him, laughing at his jokes, knowing things about him that no one else should. Could I live with the thought that she had shared moments with him that I never would? I didn't know. In the end, I made the decision for myself. I couldn't keep living in the past, constantly haunted by what had happened. My husband and I tried to rebuild, but the road ahead was long, and not everything could be fixed. I had learned that sometimes, no matter how much love there is, the damage can't always be undone. But I was moving forward, slowly, step by step. And I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to his mistakes. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.